Hey guys, tonight we are going to do our next segment on our ketamine exclusive. I need to have an indicator that you can hear me or not. So can you hear me or am I just delirious? Hello? No one? No one? Damn. Ah, excellent. Excellent. I guess we have some bit of a delay there. I should. Okay. So tonight has a couple of different things that we're going to be doing today. Oh, that's quite a delay. So the first thing that we're going to do tonight is we're going to talk a little bit about ketamine and a little bit about how ketamine is being misapplied and why the scientific data supports this postulation. A little bit about waivers and protocols as far as EMS using ketamine. We have some records from Lakewood, from West Metro Fire, and how often they have administered ketamine. It's kind of alarming. And great, I'm glad it's both good. Thanks, Sub Grappling. We've got records guru Frank Sturgill, who's supposed to join in the stream. Of course, Anita Springsteen, the councilwoman for Lakewood, is going to join us tonight as a witness and also as an emerging community leader. And Stephanie London has been asked to join the panel tonight. She's also helped us, along with our doctor, our pharmacist, to obtain some of the documents that you are going to find a little bit alarming. Somebody's pushing this ketamine, and I think that we're about to get to the bottom of all of it. So, if you're Stephanie, Anita, or Frank, and you're listening in, I sent you an email with the link to come into StreamYards. So you can click on that link. It should take you right in. After this discussion of what excited delirium is and what it is not, or more importantly, that it is not, we're going to be attending the Lakewood City Council meeting, which begins at 7. We need to be in there promptly at 7 so that we can get our name on the list to speak during public comment. And I'm going to be asking for a call to action tonight for you to call in. We have a number of issues that need to be complained about with Lakewood. I'm going to ask people to bring up specific issues, and I'm going to ask people to call in. I want everyone to call in. It's high time that Lakewood start paying attention. If they want to play big boy games, then we need to give them a big boy response. We're going to teach them to listen tonight. And we're going to ask them to place an immediate moratorium on the use of ketamine in Lakewood. So, first of all, if you recall the Jeremiah Axtell story, let me try and... Oh, great. First of all, I reformatted my computer and now all my drives are reconfigured. So that's too bad. I forgot to get that ready to go. If you guys have seen the Jeremiah Axtell video, let me try and reload that video here. I'm just going to have to ask you to go with me that he was ketamine inappropriately. We're going to go through some of the records. First of all, what is excited delirium? You're going to be stunned to find out that excited delirium does not exist. We have a timeline here that goes back to 2009 by a doctor by the name of DeBard. So this is a question about delirium, and it talks here about a usually brief state of excitement and mental confusion, often accompanied by hallucinations. And on the other side, it has violent mental agitation. Well, the difference between delirium, for example, and dementia is that dementia is related to the permanent disruption of the brain structure. It's brain damage, whereas delirium is reversible. Sort of like asthma is a reversible condition, delirium is a reversible condition. It's frequently temporary. We know that all of the ketamine use stems from basically a handful of documents. In particular, this white paper on excited delirium syndrome, published in September of 2009. This is crazy. This is crazy. This is the work of a man by the name of Debard, primarily. Here's Debard. And what we're also going to see through this thread is a large number of doctors who are former police officers or worked in correctional institutes. There's three primary names that I'm going to highlight for you tonight. One is Debard, Mark Debard. He's the #1 guy. Also, we have Donald Dawes, and we also have a guy by the name of Gary Vilke. They're all law enforcement with the exception of Debard, and this is Debard's report. All of the other documents regarding excited delirium stem from this one white paper. Now, this is curious as you go along here, because you're going to find out that this paper has been cited many times by, that's right, the same people that wrote it. And then they recited their buddy's work, and it was a lot like social media where you post your same shit on multiple channels. This is really kind of scientific ridiculum. I'm going to go right to a resource that's easy for you to obtain, easy for you to see. And I'm also going to try to reduce the audio in my ear without killing you guys. Wikipedia has some really good source here. Now, see, what I did again is I showed you guys this report and I didn't switch the screen. This is that white paper on excited delirium. And here's Debard. Here's Dawes. And this guy is a cop. And here's Mr. Gary Vilke. Gary Vilke doesn't show here, but actually what he did was he worked in a correctional facility for 15 years. First of all, we're going to take a look at the Wikipedia article because this actually was pretty well referenced. And I, again, want to thank everybody that helped me find all of this information. Patrick Partridge asks, is there any studies that rebut this planted paper? Yes, they all do. All the studies rebut this planted paper. So here is the excited delirium, also known as EXDS, excited delirium syndrome. And it says right here, excited delirium is not recognized by professional medical associations. No reputable medical organization, neither the American Medical Association nor the American Psychological Association, recognizes excited delirium as a medical or mental health condition. Well, the great thing is that that's true. That's actually true. And as we're following this, I think that we're going to find that what we have is a situation where they are trying to immunize themselves from civil liability in wrongful death. You're going to see the words police, law enforcement, wrongful death everywhere in all this documentation. Here it says here that EXD has been accepted by the National Association of Medical Examiners, couldn't find a reference, and the American College of Emergency Physicians, which is true. They argued in 2009 that the white paper that excited delirium may be described by several codes within the ICD-9. This is highly prejudicial because it turns out that it does not actually exist in the ICD-9, nor does it exist in the ICD-10. As a matter of fact, it does not even exist in this Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. So how come they're using it? They're not all using it. Some of them are using it. So it's important for us to recognize right away that excited delirium does not exist. No reputable medical organization recognizes excited delirium as a viable health condition or mental health condition. Now, this little rabbit hole is going to get even worse. You're going to see that the main sources down here, look at this. I told you you'd see the words police. Again, not recognized by the APA, the AMA, or the World Health Organization. It's a condition often attributed to deaths while in the custody of law enforcement and disproportionately applied to Black and Hispanic victims. It's associated with taser use, such as Christopher Matthew Poore. Here's our references. It starts immediately with the DeBard reference. Again, here, this is actually the same reference. Okay, this document references this document, which means it's the same as this document. The curious thing is that the I get these acronyms all wrong. The American College of Emergency Physicians did, in fact, publish a statement recognizing excited delirium in the 2009 DeBard paper. However, in 2016, they retracted it. They retracted it because it was based on bad science. It's debunked. It's disavowed. They said, yeah, we said this, but you know what? We were in error. And this is the great miracle of science, is that science can move on. Science can learn. Science can grow. And in this case, medical science grew and said, stop doing this. Physicians and pharmacists refuse to administer ketamine at all, nearly in every situation. As a matter of fact, I should have, see, I have this printed out. The regulations for the state of Colorado provide for one use of ketamine, and it's to tranquilize animals. That's right. It's a horse tranquilizer, not a human tranquilizer. It's a horrible human tranquilizer. We get a lot of information about this problem. I did cite to you the ICD manuals do not contain excited delirium. They do not. It does not exist. The DSM-5 does not contain excited delirium. How many horses died? I don't know. It's used to put them down and euthanize them. So let's take a look at some of these sources that people are using. Here's a great website. If you really want to learn how blueshbags learn how to do their jobs, they don't learn at the law library. They learn at the gun range, and they learn on Police One. When I tell you about how these things are debunked, and I'm jumping around a little bit because it flows in thought, even though it may not flow in time. This article was published in March of 2019. Who published it? Gary Vilke. Here's the scary thing, you guys. He is a fellow at the ACEP. The very people that debunked his work 3 years earlier. 3 years earlier. He's a fellow with this organization, and they debunked his work, and he's still publishing it. It says here, fortunately, several high-quality studies of EXDS have recently been published, so we know a lot more about how to recognize it and treat it. Actually, that's utterly false. None of the studies that were published are high quality. As a matter of fact, the studies that were published, even his own study expressly states that the quality is poor, but he's telling police that these are high quality findings. This is embarrassing, to say the least. It says much of the initial writing on EXDS is still accurate, and recommendations from the American College of Emergency Physicians white paper on excited delirium should be followed. This is the white paper that was debunked. I want to point out here, you can go to the, is that backwards or forwards? You can go to the American College for Emergency Physicians, and you can find this article from January 2006 where they write, nope, bad plan, don't use this shit. It says the American College of Emergency Physicians produced a statement a few years ago acknowledging excited delirium as a formal diagnosis. Currently, the ICD-10 and DSM-5 do not have excited delirium as such. Now, this is really good. The condition has been refuted by the literature in the legal and medico-legal realms as to not create a diagnosis that would distract and possibly defer investigation of wrongful death patients with alleged ESD that expire in law enforcement custody. So the doctors, the pharmacists, and the physicians, they said, hey, we think that you guys are using this as a guise to cover up wrongful death. And they disavowed DeBard and Vilke's work. They disavowed it. This is easy to find. It's right on their website. Will it focus? Focus, focus. Maybe I need more light. Go here and verify this. You don't have to take my word for it. And let me turn on some more light. That may help us a little bit. Does that focus a little better? Oh, a lot better. Don't take my word for this, because you also can look it up. So how is it that in 2009, the paper is published? In 2012, they reference themselves in their own paper. In 2016, they're disavowed, and their documents are removed from the journals. And in 2016, Lakewood starts using it. West Metro Fire. And then in 2019, this guy whose work was disavowed by his own organization is still publishing this shit like it's new. Here's some more of the problems. This is why we know that this is a huge problem, and it's a cover-up of police misconduct. When you look at the Jeremiah Axtell videos, which we don't have time to go through those before the city council meeting tonight, but I encourage you to go look at them. Watch for a couple of things in the records. One, what is the role of EMS and sedation? Did you guys notice in the video how long it took? All kinds of police came, tons of police came, and then tons of EMS came. The role of EMS and sedation, they're to work together, back and forth with each other, so that they can sedate this patient and transport them to the hospital. One of the key facts here that's listed is tactile hyperthermia. In exactly one of the reports, they stated that Jeremiah's skin was hot to the touch and that he was sweaty. But when he got to the hospital, the indicators were all warm, dry. So he wasn't hyperthermic, but they tried to make a situation that looked like he was hyperthermic because elevated body temperature is an indicator of excited delirium. And that's ridiculous. Also, they say that these are more dangerous than drunks. Look at this. And they tout themselves here, a very interesting study. Well, I'm not so sure that it was all that interesting. Baldwin's another name you'll see quoting each other all over the place. It says of the total forceful arrests, 32% of them were emotionally disturbed, as defined by the police, by the way, and displayed at least 3 signs of EXDS. They found an interesting correlation between excited delirium severity and the number of officers called to the scene. The more EXDS features, the more officers are required to control. Well, guess what? There weren't any officers required to control Jeremiah Axtell. He walked himself to the car. They made exactly 0 attempt to place him in the car, but the report says they tried to place him in the car and they could not. So you got 10 cops there. 10 cops can't put this guy in the car? Well, one of the little symptoms we're going to see is extreme superhuman strength, impervious to pain. But their lies don't match up with the evidence. They moved him far away from Anita, who had the camera, so that she couldn't record what they were doing. Also, there's a strong inverse correlation between alcohol intoxication and the number of EXDS features. At best, he was intoxicated. His blood work showed he was intoxicated, but he wasn't on drugs. And then one of the things that's particularly disturbing to me is the media myths persist. What media myths? Another popular myth is that the American Medical Association does not recognize excited delirium. That has been false since 2009. March of 2019. Disavowed in 2016. So no, actually the myth is true. It's not a false myth. It's a true myth, Mr. Vilke, and it's your own fucking work. I would think you would know if your work had been disavowed. I'm just saying. But let's keep going on about this. Excited delirium is widely accepted. It's accepted in a handful of documents that all reference themselves by a handful of physicians that work with law enforcement. I'm not sure how wise that is, but it's accepted in forensic pathology. What is forensic pathology? The study of dead people and how they died. It's cited by medical examiners. What do medical examiners do? They study dead people. And it's used to explain sudden in custody. Oh, would you look at that? It says deaths. This is all about dead people. We don't administer ketamine to dead people. We administer the ketamine to living people who then have an extraordinarily high risk, about 10%, of suddenly becoming dead. Individuals who were combative, highly agitated, excitation, agitation, excitability, paranoia, aggression, apparent immunity to pain, associated with stimulant use and psychiatric disorders. Guys, this guy was cooperative with the police. He was irritated. No question. If you look at the history of this facility, he was definitely irritated and had absolute justification to be irritated. Absolutely. And then one of the things that we hadn't figured out, what we thought was odd, was this 30 minutes almost that it took as all of these police and paramedics assemble. Well, it's because the police determined right away that Jeremiah Axtell was in excited delirium. That's right. They made this massive medical decision and amassed all these resources. So here's this guy who's supine, lying on the ground, saying, go ahead, do what you want to do. Go ahead. Calling EMS is never the wrong answer because other problems can mimic excited delirium, such as, oh, look at that, intoxication. Intoxication. So this is a contempt of cop case. They were angry with him for calling them bitches and cunts and faggots. Put on your big boy britches. They pulled a taser on him almost immediately. But we're going to keep seeing that they didn't even meet these requirements. They knew he was intoxicated. But there's other problems here. Here's the conclusion. Remember, at the top, he said there's lots of things that are really good here. We're learning some new things about the excited delirium syndrome that we did not know a few years ago. Yeah, like a few years ago, they disavowed all your work. That seems like a pretty important thing to point out that you learned. Hopefully, this information will be of benefit to law enforcement officers who have to handle this extremely challenging condition. You mean this condition? It's very challenging. And look who we have: Vilke, DeBard, and Dawes. As usual. That's right. The guys recommending this stuff are the guys that wrote it. I don't see a conflict of interest there. Do you see why Lakewood must immediately terminate the use and withdraw the waivers for the use of ketamine? But it gets even worse. Here is a fairly lengthy document. It's not terribly lengthy. It's only 15 pages. Excited Delirium, a systematic review. And this is the continuing medical education in academic emergency medicine. These names show up fairly regularly, but they're not the ultimate authors. But let's take a look at here's our abstract. Now, this is what a scientific and viable paper might look like. We aimed to clarify the definition, epidemiology, and pathophysiology of excited delirium, and to summarize evidence-based treatment recommendations. Here's the problem. They conducted a literature search. They looked at articles published up to 2017. Remember that in 2016, it was disavowed. So that means they should have known. And what did they rely on? They relied on police and medical expert reports on, that's right, dead people. They're recommending that the treatments are symptomatic and often include rapid sedation with benzodiazepines. As an alternative, ketamine is suggested. So why is ketamine being the first one over benzodiazepine? Frank Sturgill says that Lakewood doesn't have jurisdiction over the waivers. That's too bad. They're going to get phone calls tonight anyway, because they do have the ability to pressure these people. These are our legislative people. This mayor, this council has the power, has the absolute power to lobby for this, to become a leader. And I'm not going to divorce them of their responsibility here. The police made the decision to ketamine Jeremiah Axtell. As a matter of fact, more than half of all the ketamine application in the entire Metro West rescue system was done by Lakewood. Lakewood is not the end-all to be-all of West Metro Fire. So Lakewood absolutely has a responsibility here. While they may not have the jurisdiction, they certainly have the pressure. And that's what we're going to pressure them. The problem is that law enforcement is actually using ketamine to make people more compliant, to make them easier to manage, or to punish them, not to help them. When you find out that they administered ketamine as often as they did Benadryl, think about all the emergency calls that would go on where a person is in anaphylaxis, having a severe allergic reaction of some kind, and EMS administered Benadryl as frequently as the sedative drug ketamine. Josh Lyons asked, are we talking to the city council meeting tonight? I sure hope so. I sure hope so. I know I plan on. But let's look at the conclusion that these idiots had here. The overall quality of the studies was poor. Wait a minute. That doesn't seem to go with what he said over here. Gary Vilke said that several quality studies have been done. But the ACAM, which he's a fellow at, says the quality of the studies was poor. A universally recognized definition is lacking. They're mostly syndromatic and based on clinical subjective criteria. They looked at the records of dead bodies. They didn't even look at the body. And the mortality rate, high mortality rate, may be due to a definition inconsistency and reporting bias. Well, where did they get their information from? And notice that this was published in 2017, a year after their primary references were debunked. Definition of EXDS was brought by 3 retrospective studies. We decided to include a literature review specifically related to the definition of excited delirium, as well as expert consensus report, the white paper from 2009, the debunked white paper. They published this article in May of 2018. What the problem that they have too is that there's a very wide range of inclusion. Retrospective cases, 7 cases, all the patients had 5 to 7 criteria. In another series, 12% were reported to have 1 or 2 of the criteria. But what are the criteria? Some of the criteria are as simple as not being cooperative with police. As a matter of fact, non-cooperation with police and EMS appears over and over and over again. And look at our favorite guys, Strout, DeBard, Vilke, the guys that are reflexively reporting on themselves. Also, we have here, oh, look at that. The frequency of weapon used by law enforcement was described in 3 articles. Weapon use was observed in 30% of the patients. Could they be using this as a cover-up to a wrongful death? Absolutely. Here's some of the symptoms. Severe agitation, violence, and thrashing. Jeremiah Axtell did not exhibit extreme and severe violence and thrashing. He didn't exhibit any extreme paranoia. He did not appear hypervigilant. It says lack of tiring and constant physical activity. They really didn't give him a chance to wear out. He just sort of laid down on the ground. Unusual or unexpected strength. Really? Really? Look at that. Unusual strength. Are you seeing these names report over and over? DeBard, Strout. Impervious to pain. Jeremiah Axtell repeatedly complained that his cuffs were hurting him after they fucked with him. They didn't have a problem until they were fucking with him. He was not impervious to pain. He was in pain. Look at this. Police non-compliance. Remember it said that these patients exhibited 1 or more symptoms? Police non-compliance being 1 symptom. Hot to the touch, they made that symptom up. Clothing removal, he didn't remove his clothing. In fact, it's fairly common for these people to remove their clothing. Oh, go figure, they're hot to the touch. They're in fear, they're in panic. They have rapid heart rate, rapid breathing, sweating. Well, he wasn't sweating. He didn't have an elevated heart rate. They took his vitals at the hospital. He had normal respirations and heart rate. They were elevated, but they weren't what you would call tachycardic. They were convinced that he was on drugs. They didn't believe. They wrote in the report. He says he's not using drugs, but frankly, we don't believe him. Look at that, alcohol. Guess what you don't give a person that's been drinking alcohol? Ketamine. They have all kinds of drugs that they could use. Lorazepam is what the hospital used. Haloperidol, the hospital used that. But they chose ketamine. They chose ketamine. I wish I had time to go through all these, but I've just gotten some highlights because we only had an hour here. Based on the definition of excited, because the definition of excited delirium remains mostly syndromatic, and based on clinical criteria, it is prone to subjectivity. The white papers recommend 6 criteria for a diagnosis. But in numerous case series, patients are diagnosed with fewer than 6 criteria, between 1 and 6. Wow. That's just a way of saying, hey guys, you can make anything fit. The most frequently cited are hyper-aggressive behavior with superhuman strength. He was aggressive, but he wasn't hyper-aggressive. Remember, he backed up from them. He laid down on the ground and put his hands behind his head. Go ahead, do what you're going to do. He was sitting there. They never made any attempt to put him in the vehicle. The police reports say he could not be placed in the vehicle. 10 fucking cops and you can't put this superhumanly strong guy in the car? Yeah, bring over the gurney. Now, they were already ready for the gurney. They already knew what was going to happen. They just had to do it outside of the view of the camera. In conclusion, low to very low levels of evidence. But it just told us these were high-quality studies. The systematic review has several limitations. There remain numerous unresolved questions that warrant further investigation. Vilke, DeBard, Stroud. Vilke, DeBard, Stroud, and I only highlight, look, Stroud again, Vilke again, Stroud again, Vilke again. All leading back to DeBard. And they were also part of the original study anyway, so they're just like referencing themselves and calling themselves marvelous. This is really problematic, and we have to put an end to this. This administration of ketamine is strictly a contempt of cop, and the overall use of ketamine is not being used appropriately. How do I know it's not being used appropriately? Well, first of all, we've been pulling records. Frank has been pulling them. Anita was able to get some. And I pulled this one up just to say they denied most of the records because of HIPAA. But I love this little slogan they have. Whatever it takes to serve the police. We've obtained the logs. These are the dates, the drug, and the city that these various drugs were administered. It's a very large data set, and I'll be processing some of that and bringing some of that to light. One thing I can tell you is that they are 10 times more likely to administer ketamine than they are to administer ibuprofen. And they administer ketamine as often as they administer Benadryl. Isn't that interesting? They administer Narcan about 4 times as likely. So they're 4 times as likely to administer a life-saving drug, Narcan, used for opiate withdrawals to save, or opioid overdose to save somebody's life. But ketamine doesn't have a life-saving. They use it as much as a quarter of the frequency, and it has no real life-saving event. It's used to make the person easier to manage. That's it. Easier to manage. How is it that these pharmacists I've been talking to that have worked in psychiatric wards for over a decade have never, ever, 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 ever in their lives, when dealing with hundreds, if not thousands, of actually delirious patients, needed to administer ketamine? Well, it's because the condition of excited delirium does not exist. So stop using the term. We do know who the officers were that administered it, and here's what they had to say about it. Dispatched police to scene with a male party in custody. They attempted to assess the patient on the ground, but the patient was uncooperative and extremely agitated. Jesus Christ, if they think that Jeremiah Axtell was extremely agitated, how the fuck is it possible? I've never been hit with ketamine. I'm just saying. They attempted to load the patient in the police car, but he became highly agitated and uncontrolled. Wait a minute. He was already extremely agitated. Highly agitated and uncontrollable? No, they never even opened the door. They never even opened the door. He was never within 5 feet of the vehicle. They took him in a little group. They shielded him from the camera. They waved over the gurney, and he's like, no. What's going on? I'm letting everybody know I'm going to cooperate 100%. They wheel the gurney over. He sits himself on the gurney. He lays himself down on the gurney. And then they nailed him with ketamine. That doesn't seem uncontrollable to me. Yeah. But here it says, sedated and restrained, transport non-emergent. But if you look at all these guidelines, it says that it is emergency medical situation. Excited delirium is an emergency that requires immediate care. So which one is it? Emergency or non-emergency? And we have obtained records of certification on, I can't even pronounce Austin's last name, and John Herrera. They are certified to administer ketamine, but they're not doctors. So how does this happen? So this leads us to our next little piece. And we've got about 15 minutes. If you guys can get the link to the Lakewood City Council posted in the chat for people, let's start getting prepared for that because we're about 15 minutes away. What we're going to go on now is, now that we know that excited delirium does not actually exist, let's go into what gave Austin and Herrera the authority to administer it in the first place. They have a waiver. West Metro Fire has a waiver to administer ketamine. Here's how this works. You cannot administer ketamine to a patient without a doctor's order. So what they have to do is they have to follow these protocols that were written by a doctor. They follow the protocol to the letter, and then they must immediately go to the doctor, and the doctor writes the prescription ex post facto. That's right. There is actually going to be a prescription written by a doctor. We have to find this yet, and I'm sure Jeremiah will be getting that, written to authorize the fact that ketamine was actually injected without his consent into his perfectly compliant body. Well, there are guidelines to the treatment of patients with delirium. Look at this. The practice guideline for the treatment of patients with delirium. Do you see a word missing there? Anybody? What's the word that's missing here? That's right. The word excited doesn't exist. Now, good for us, none of these doctors have published any of that stupid shit. This guideline has been updated from time to time, but not a whole lot. By the way, when you're writing protocol, that's what we're going to be talking about here, is that actually we have a protocol here. We're going to go into this protocol that is used by West Metro Fire. Now you're saying, wait a minute, this says St. Anthony's Hospital. That's because St. Anthony's are the ones underwriting the authorization for West Metro Fire's waiver to use ketamine. When you're writing these, I've been speaking to some physicians, and particularly pharmacists are the ones that are involved in writing these protocols. And they have to look at all the different drug interactions when they write a working protocol. I wish I had an example at my fingertips. I'll have one next show, though, of a protocol. It's not just interactions with other drugs or chemicals, but also with natural drugs. For example, St. John's wort should be on there somewhere if it has an adverse reaction. And I don't know if ketamine does or not because I'm not a doctor. But what's funny is that we don't know it from this protocol either. There is a standard of treatment for delirium. Well referenced. You can see that this document is fairly lengthy, and this is the standard practice guideline. And nowhere in here do we ever find ketamine. Notice that this is the American Psychiatric Association that makes this guideline available. Last updated in 2010, as far as I can tell, and we are using this for educational and news purposes. This is a guideline for treatment for people with delirium. Basically, what you do is if they're talking to Joe behind them, you include Joe in the conversation. These people are dissociated in time. These people are dissociated in event. When you see the terms oriented, in Jeremiah's case, they said oriented times 4. He knew exactly who he was. He knew exactly where he was. He knew exactly what was going on. He was completely aware of his entire situation. Not delirious. A delirious patient is not aware. And it's not so important that when you're asking a delirious patient questions like, who's the president today? It's not so important that they say that they know that it's Donald Trump and not Hillary Clinton. What's important is that they can answer the question at all. Right? The delirious patient will be completely incapable of tracking that question to a logical answer, right or wrong. Who's the president today? Hey, my friend Joe is here to have tea with us. Would you like a cup? See the difference there? They do not have a logically connected, contextually appropriate response, right or wrong. It's completely wrong. And the way that you deal with these people is you meet them where they're at. You come to where they're at. You say, oh, it's Joe. Tell me about Joe. Oh, Joe's my buddy. He works in the engine room on the ship. Oh, hey, Joe. I think they need you down in the engine room for a minute because George and I are going to have a little conversation if you can give us a minute. No, you're not talking to Joe. You're talking to the Joe that the delirious patient thinks is there. That's how you manage a delirious patient. You treat them with respect as a human being, and you come to them on their level. You don't nail them with drugs. And when I've spoken with these psychiatric doctors and these pharmacists, they very rarely sedate at all, much less with ketamine. So how are they administering this ketamine all over the place? This is really problematic for all of us. Well, St. Anthony has a protocol. This leads us to our next problem. Not only is the protocol wrong, we know it's not appropriate because it doesn't have important pieces that are required. But what we also know is that they didn't follow it. Even if they had followed it, it's still wrong. But had they followed this wrong procedure, Jeremiah never would have been hit with ketamine. So these are special protocols. And here's the doctor right here that put his life on the line when he put Jeremiah Axtell's life on the line. He could lose his job for this. And of course, that's our intention. Here's a couple of special protocols here. They have the excited delirium agitated patient protocol, and they have the ketamine protocol. And both of these have stars on them because they have waiver specific. They had to get a waiver from the state to do this. Remember, these are being evaluated and administered by non-doctors. And okay, there we go. So these have steps, and they're supposed to be fairly simple. And here we go. Here's the excited delirium protocol. Excited delirium and extremely combative patients, uncontrolled by other mechanisms. Not delirious or combative, not delirious and combative, but delirious and extremely combative. And take a look at their own documentation right here. Excited delirium syndrome. These patients are truly out of control. They have a life-threatening medical emergency, and they will have some or all of the following symptoms. SX is abbreviation for symptom. Some or all. Some. Hyperthermia, increased strength, tachycardia, hallucination, hyperaggression, disorientation, and paranoia. Well, they tried to claim that he had hyperthermia, but the record shows he did not. In fact, when you read some of those other papers that I pointed out, even Vilke himself said it's very important that law enforcement gets EMS to take the person's temperature right away, so that if the person dies, or if they've already died when EMS arrives, they can show this hyperthermia question. And exactly 1 out of all them 20 people wrote that he was hot to the touch. Tachycardia, okay, is at the peak heart rate that I saw in the report, somewhere around 110. That's elevated. That's elevated. But when I talked to the doctors about this, they said tachycardia is like 130 to 180. So 110 is elevated, but would probably not classify as tachycardic. Was not disoriented. He knew goddamn well what was happening. He's like, no. What do we need that for? You were here first. I'm supposed to go with you. He called that guy Jake when Jake said his name was Jake. He called that guy Eric when Eric said his name was Eric. He was extraordinarily aware. And we know that they had every intention of sedating him very early on. You guys were watching those videos with us, and we caught the cop say, relax, Jeremiah, relax. We're going to help you. We're going to get you the help you need. The help he needed was apparently sedation. Why? Because the police told them to do it. They did their assessment. Their assessment didn't match. Was the patient not responsive to verbal de-escalation techniques? Oh, he completely de-escalated. This is for adult patients with profound agitation that pose extreme risk. And they have an alternative that has fewer side effects, and they didn't do it. If the person is still significantly even an agitated patient has a different flow path that does not include ketamine. Where do we see? Benzodiazepine, which in all the documentation we read is one of the preferred drugs. It's certainly not ketamine. And this is a supplemental protocol. We have an even worse problem. Down here is the ketamine protocol. There we go. Ketamine applies to a paramedic. Not any first responder, but you must be a paramedic. A different classification. It provides a description of what it does. Here are some of the indications. Adult patient with signs of excited delirium, which we've learned does not actually exist, or extremely combative. Well, that's not what it said up at the top. It said excited delirium and extremely combative. It was a multiplication, not an addition. The conjunction or is one or the other. The conjunction of and means both must exist together. So we know that their protocol is wrong just from the language they're using right here. Uncontrolled by other mechanisms, where the safety is a substantial concern. Guys, the guy was laying on the ground, sitting there. He was peacefully handcuffed. He stood up. He walked himself to the car. He walked himself to the gurney. He sat himself on the gurney, and he laid himself down on the gurney. Nobody's safety was a concern except his, and not by his own actions. And I see we got 5 minutes to go, guys. Right, Frank says that paramedic and an EMT are not the same. So of all those people that were in that group, very few of them actually had the legal authorization to apply ketamine at all. Contradictions. Right here, contradiction should have been alcohol. Absolutely, alcohol and ketamine are contradicted. Some of the things that we noticed in the reports were when he got to the hospital, he was favoring his neck. He was trying to protect his airway. So we think that he was exhibiting laryngeospasm, and he may have had some vomiting or hypersalivation and had something put down his throat to suck it out. We're not sure. It's not indicated in the report. We also know that 20% of patients that are given an extremely high dose of ketamine, which 5 milligrams per kilogram is extreme. The studies talk about 1 to 2 milligrams being extreme. In the case of Elijah McLean, the dose was somewhere around 8 to 10 milligrams per kilogram. He was extraordinarily overdosed. But Uh, Jeremiah was at about 5 milligrams. We figured roughly, so that's pretty high. And in 20% of the people exhibit with 1 to 2 milligrams, 1 in 5 of those people actually went into this emergence reaction. Look at this. As an actual reaction to ketamine, that's right, it's excited delirium, anxiety, aggression, hallucinations. And look, consider benzodiazepine. Why didn't we consider that first? Right? So let's see. We also know that they have a problem here, because if you take and pay attention here, they cannot deviate from these orders. These are doctor's orders. Ketamine is provided for intramuscular administration for excited delirium in 100 milligram per milliliter concentration. All cases must be reviewed by the medical director, so we have more records to go get. And that there's the agitated combative protocol, which I can't tell from this if it's the same protocol that's up above, because the protocol up above doesn't have a number on it, but it's listed as the agitated combative protocol. Their terminology is not consistent through their own document. But take a look at this. Remember, 100 milligrams per milliliter? They must follow this. This says 500 milligrams per milliliter. Per 5 cc's. That's my mistake. But it says divided into 2 syringes. We only know of 1 syringe that he was injected with. They can only inject up to 3 cc's. So he probably got this at least twice, because they administered 450 milligrams. Either they administered more than the 3 cc's, or they administered it twice, and we don't have an adequate record for that. So they didn't even follow their own protocols here. And their protocols don't say, call this doctor, call this location, here's the other side effects. There's no, the fact that ketamine does not exist with a prohibition of alcohol is alarming. And there's nobody signed this off. We don't have a date on this. Who knows if this is even current? Who knows if the one they used was current? These are questions we don't know. So, hey, it's 7 o'clock. We need to get to Lakewood. So if you guys have been posting the link in there, great. Dump me. Let's jump over to Lakewood. Make sure you get in there quickly so that you can speak. We want to demand that they immediately order West Metro Fire to stop administering ketamine. And we want to demand that their police stop using excited delirium. We want them to train that excited delirium stopped existing at least 4 years ago.